Good morning, and welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church of Richmond. My name is Larry Kruger, and it's my honor to serve on your board of directors. For those of you who are new to us, and members and friends who are tuning in from near and far, welcome. We are so grateful to be able to connect with you this morning. We are a community of many faith journeys and beliefs committed to being deliberately diverse and fully inclusive. We want you to know that whoever you are, you belong here. We are a community that is resilient and committed to healing, does the work that needs to be done, and commits to maintaining and establishing our relationships. Let us continue to stand together on the side of love. For more information on First UU, please visit our website at richmonduu.org, subscribe to our YouTube channel to view past services, and log in to services 5 to 10 minutes early to catch the preceding announcements. We also invite you to join our coffee service before services outside in the courtyard and President's Hall. So thank you for being with us today. May this be a comforting, centering, and restorative moment for you. And now I invite you to stand and greet your neighbors.
A reminder to remain standing as we sing hymn.
All right, so please remain standing as we start with our opening hymn.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Good morning. I am the Reverend Sherman Logan, and I'm blessed and honored to serve this congregation as the acting senior minister. I'm so glad to see all of you here today on this wonderful Father's Day, and to the fathers, grandfathers, father figures out there, happy Father's Day. You know, we have to give fathers their credit sometimes too. So I want to take a moment to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who are with us today in the Great Hall, those who are joining us virtually, and a special welcome to those who are visiting us for the first, second, third, or 100th time. Whether you're just here to take a look or searching for a place to worship, we are delighted to have you here. So welcome to this place of worship. Today we celebrate Juneteenth. It is a holiday that commemorates the emancipation of those who have been enslaved in the United States. On June 19, 1865, the news of the Emancipation Proclamation has finally reached the slaves 2½ years after President Lincoln signed on January 1, 1863. Upon hearing the celebration broke out, and these were dangerous times for the enslaved folks, and even in the face of threats and resistance, the former enslaved Africans found ways to give voice to a wide range of thoughts and emotion at the announcement of the end of legalized slavery in the United States of America. Juneteenth is a day with an built-in tension. It celebrates a delayed and in many ways incomplete liberation of the continued struggle for equality. But it still celebrates the hopes for a future Juneteenth filled with more hope, more love, more justice, and more freedom. Which reminds me that my ancestors struggled for more freedom for their children, and the struggles continue today. Now let us enter into a time of worship.
We light this chalice, symbol of our faith alive in this world, naming our vision of collective liberation and daring to remember each other into beloved community. Long Road to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. I have walked that long road to freedom. I've tried not to falter. I've made missteps along the way, but I've discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I've taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can only rest for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not ended.
As we enter into this time of meditation, let us take a moment to settle into silence. Sit straight in your seat, plant both feet firmly on the ground. Breathe in and breathe out. Close your eyes as you are willing. Hear and feel your quiet breathing. Hear and feel the quiet of this room and the community of quiet people. As we sit in the quiet, feel the life that stretches between us that fills this room. Spirit of life, God of our own understanding, we welcome the presence of the holy in this place as we are together today for a time of prayer. Guide us now as we link heart to heart in the stillness and calmness of this moment. On Juneteenth this year, we ask you to guide our nation through these troubled times. This day particularly reminds us of the progress made. This day also particularly reminds us of the progress we have not made. So we celebrate the freedom of Black lives in our nation, and we grieve that we have not correctly reconciled racism in our nation. Grant us grace to contend fearlessly against evil and to make no peace with oppression. Help us, like those generations before us who resisted the evil of slavery and human bondage in any form and any matter of oppression. Help us to use our freedom to bring justice among people and nations everywhere. So may the good news of this faith motivate us to love each other. May the ideas of our words match the practices of our lives. May a fresh empowerment of your Spirit unite us together. We ask these things in the name of all that is holy. May this be so. Amen. Ashe.
Wow, I'm short. Hello. This month's Share the Plate will be going to Equality Virginia. As most people know, June is Pride Month, and LGBTQ youth use this church as a space to be themselves and be free. I can personally relate with this. I can say without a doubt that because I myself am an LGBTQ person, if we went through a period of time where we were not coming to the church all the time, and I can say that if I had been coming, I definitely would have had confidence to be myself here. LGBT people need a lot of support right now, especially with current bills that are being passed in our government, which don't make sense to me, but I'm not going to go there today. I'm sorry, I'm very anxious right now. Okay, I lost my place. I'm so sorry. Equality Virginia is an organization that understands LGBTQ Virginians, and they support everyone, and they do not support violence, discrimination, or disparities, and with people of color either. So that's nice. With their support, they can make sure, with our support, I'm sorry, they can make sure that they are still able to, okay, what's the word? I'm sorry. Keep going, basically. And they advocate legally as well. And I think that's important, especially with politics right now. We're not going to go there again. And as Unitarian Universalists, I feel like it's our job, well, not necessarily, but I feel like it's our job to welcome everyone. I feel like that's pretty important for the Unitarian Universalist community. And yeah, Equality Virginia, I can tell they're some really good people. And your gifts will now be taken and gratefully received. Happy Pride Month, everybody.
Thank you, Isaac. On your screen, you'll see ways that you can make donations or contribution to the church. And if you want to give cash this morning, raise your hand and the usher will pass out an envelope. Thank you.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, a peace that was meant to be, with God as our Father, brothers all are we. I walk with my brothers in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Our next reading, Juneteenth, by Noah Griffin. Juneteenth, a celebration of Liberation Day. When the word of emancipation reached Texas slaves, they say, in sorrow we're brought here to till a harvest land. We live and die and fought here till freedom was at hand. They tore apart our families. They stole life's nascent breath, turned women into mammies, and worked our men to death. They shamed the very nation which fostered freedom's birth. It died on a plantation, denying man his worth. But greed and misplaced honor brought crisis to a head, and justice fell upon her, the weight of union dead. They fought to save a nation, and yet they saved its soul for moral condemnation and made the country whole. But when the war was waning and the battle was in doubt, the soldiers were complaining and many dropping out. There seems but one solution, which might yet save the day, although its execution looms several months away. The Congress was divided, the cabinet as well. Abe did his best to hide it, and no one did he tell. He meant to sign an order to deal the South a blow, the Mason-Dixon border, and the rebel states below. We now have to contend with the free man on their land, for slavery has ended for woman, child, and man. The time 1863, the first day of the year. But June of 65 would be the time we hold dear, for that would be when freedom thought first saw full light of day, and justified why men have fought and died along the way. Now, every June, we celebrate what Lincoln had in mind, the day he did emancipate the bonds of all mankind. Today is Juneteenth, the day we celebrate the emancipation of those who have been enslaved in the United States. Juneteenth is the oldest naturally celebrated commemoration of ending slavery in the United States. But we didn't celebrate it in my home, and we weren't taught about it in any of my history classes. And although we attended New Year's Eve's watch night services at my church, the service that commemorated the Emancipation Proclamation, my minister said a nary word about Juneteenth. And it didn't take center stage on the holidays that my community celebrated. Now, on January the 1st, 1980, Juneteenth became an official state holiday in Texas. The successful passage of this bill marked Juneteenth as the first emancipation celebration granted official state recognition. And last year, President Biden signed it into a law, declaring June 19 a federal holiday. And I've never heard of it until I attended seminary 20 years ago. It was in my black church history class when I first learned the significance of Juneteenth, and there I learned to appreciate the freedom that I had and taken for granted at the expense of my ancestors' freedom, and elusive freedom that they fought and died for. And through the years, despite the so-called progress black Americans have made in this country, we still have a long way to go. You see, my friends, the struggle for freedom and equality continues not only for black folks, but for people of color and folks who continue to live on the margin in the land of the free. So let me take a few moments, if you will, to share a brief history of Juneteenth. All right. It was June 19, 1865, when U.S. federal troops, led by Major General Gordon Granger, arrived in Galveston, Texas, to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved African Americans were free. The troops arrived a full 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, I'm sure, just like me, that many folks in this room this morning are watching from home, especially y'all of my generation, were taught that Lincoln freed the enslaved people on January the 1st, 1863, with his signature into law. That's what I was taught in all of my history classes from the 4th grade through my senior year of high school. But you know, that was a grave misconception of history, because black people didn't actually become free until General Robert E. Lee, I know you heard of him, and the Confederate States of the South surrendered to the Union States and ended the Civil War in 1865. General Granger and his troops traveled down to Galveston to tell enslaved blacks that the war was over and now they had their freedom with the support they needed to live it out. So when the newly freed enslaved people finally heard these powerful words of the Emancipation Proclamation, the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such person, and will do no acts to repress such person in any efforts they make for that actual freedom. So can you imagine how these folks felt after hundreds of years of bondage, families being torn apart, having every shred of dignity and humanity aside from their souls, that they were finally free? Can you imagine the spontaneous celebration and elation that broke out, the tears of joy when these enslaved people were told on June 19, 1865, that they are free? Once those transformative words of the Emancipation Proclamation reached the now freed men and women, they experienced freedom that they prayed for a long time. And this newfound freedom implied for the first time that the United States protected blacks. And friends, for a short time after the Civil War, the federal government actually enforced laws to protect blacks in the South, and black folks finally acquired a modicum of power. Now, with this new taste of freedom, these former enslaved people began to take advantage of their newfound power. Some dared to ask for reparation for the long hours that they worked on plantation. Many gave themselves new names. County courthouses were overcrowded as newly freed blacks applied for licenses to legalize their marriage. Families that were torn apart and stolen from each other during the time they were in bondage began to search to be reunited. There was a run on educational primers as these free folks sought education that had long denied them. Schools and churches were built, and hundreds of black people were elected to every level of public office. And Congress founded the Freedmen's Bureau to provide relief services for formerly enslaved citizens. You see, freedom changes everything, so they thought. The optimism of the newly earned freedom was short-lived and replaced by soul-shattering betrayal of blacks who began to question whether the United States was serious about granting them their freedom. And many enslaved people, for the most part, and despite the efforts of the Freedmen's Bureau, were left to fend for themselves. Those who migrated to the North found job and housing discrimination. And those who were separated from their families discovered that there weren't any structures to support them. The abject poverty and racism that these former enslaved people experienced prohibited any hope of assimilation into American society. Many blacks were rendered powerless for years after they legally gained their freedoms. They encountered direct physical violence, segregation, and Jim Crow laws. And across the South, the former enslavers and plantation owners organized to take back the power that was granted to the blacks. The Ku Klux Klans terrorized their communities. Thriving black communities like the ones in Tulsa, Oklahoma, were eviscerated by white supremacists. Racial fears were used to break up fusion politics that helped give black voices in government. The black votes were suppressed, sound familiar? And in many areas of the country, legal segregation, essentially apartheid, was rampant. And it took almost 100 years for the civil rights movement to create a new reform era. So I can only imagine these former enslaved people wondering, is that what freedom supposed to look like? And unfortunately, in the ensuing years, after General Granger arrived in Texas and officially declared that slavery was abolished, I'm sad to say that the confluence of anti-black racism, rampant white supremacy, and unabashed imperialism was fertile soil in our country in 1865. And friends, that soil is still fertile today. Look at what's going on in our country today. Assault on democracy, voter suppression, attacks on minorities, distrust in institutions that were once bedrocks of our society. Stephanie Baptiste, a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and her perspective of Juneteenth remind us that the United States has never taken full accountability for the totalizing impact of 400 years of race-based slavery and colonialism that forged the modern era. In fact, generated everything that happened during and has come after this. She was saying in an article written in the UCSB newsletter, The Current, that Juneteenth holiday acknowledged that it took years after the legal emancipation of the slave people to release their ownership, subjugation of labor, and resource extraction of human beings with inalienable rights to be freed in a tiny step of recognizing the era of a normal, violent history. So while we celebrate Juneteenth today, Professor Baptiste reminds us it is also an opportunity for citizens of the United States to come to terms with how slavery continues to affect the lives of all Americans today. It is literally something for everyone of every race to engage in. Now it is time for our nation to take account of the lasting devastating effects that slavery continues to have on our country. Friends, the sordid history of slavery is a stain on our country, and as some scholars would say, this is this country's original sin. And it is a subject that still makes many people uncomfortable to discuss. But as Professor Baptiste reminds us, now is the time for our nation to be held accountable. True freedom will not be experienced by all until this nation reckons with its past sins of slavery, racism, and discrimination of all kinds. You know, slavery was abolished almost 160 years ago, but its vestiges and racial underpinnings that caused it to flourish, unfortunately, are still alive and well in our education, healthcare, law enforcement, employment, housing system, economic structures, and institutions, even today as we celebrate Juneteenth. So let's ponder on these alarming facts. Modern policing has its origin in slavery. Runaway enslaved peoples were considered highly valuable pieces of property, and posses were formed as a way to catch the runaways to prevent revolts and uprising. And after slavery, many police forces in the South were tasked with enforcing racist Jim Crow laws. Statistics shows us that although national unemployment rates are low, unemployment for blacks and people of color continue to rise. And as a matter of fact, unemployment is nearly twice as high for black men as white men. And black men have the highest unemployment of all race, gender, and groups of America. Our school system regularly fails black students and continue to set them up for failure. And in some localities, politicians are introducing legislation to ban anti-racist education, lessons that will help students understand the significance of a holiday like Juneteenth. And books that teach real history are being banned. There is a massive wealth gap between black and white Americans, and while black men comprise 6% of the United States population, they comprise 32% of the prison population. And there has been a dramatic rise in hate crimes aimed at Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, black and brown people, and our LGBTQ siblings, especially our trans youth of color. So my friends, blacks, people of color, and those who are marginalized by systems of institutional racism and discrimination of all kinds, despite the freedoms they have as citizens of these United States, the struggle continues. And the sobering facts that I just reeled off are a reminder, without a doubt, Juneteenth represents a day of denied freedom finally realized, and it also reminds us that the struggle continues. So as we celebrate Juneteenth in this faith community, as citizens of the beloved community, We need to remember that it doesn't matter how much advancement that we as a nation have made since my enslaved ancestors were told that they were free. We still continue to struggle toward progress, but as the struggle continues, we cannot give up hope. We as a nation have overcome the physical bondage of slavery, but we need to appreciate the spiritual significance of that experience. We cannot give up hope, nor can we deny our past, slight our progress, or fool ourselves about our current reality. Yes, the struggle continues, but we cannot give up hope. Yes, our nation and our beloved community have overcome many obstacles to freedoms, but we must continue to dedicate ourselves to the work yet to be done. The struggle continues, but we cannot give up hope. We must create the beloved community where power, resources, and cultural practices are shared. And as we celebrate Juneteenth together, we must keep hope alive. Juneteenth celebrates both the triumph over slavery and the commitment to continue the spiritual and theological work to overcome racial fears and create a more perfect union, even with its flaws and imperfection. And you know, this is hard work, and the struggle to make this a more loving society where the inherent worth and dignity of all people are respected began when the first settlers stepped foot on this continent over 400 years ago, and the struggles continue today. So today we honor the 157th anniversary of Juneteenth, the celebration that ends chattel slavery in the United States by envisioning a world freer than the one in which we currently live in. We remember our elders in the struggle for freedom, those who paid the cost of freedom: Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., and all of my ancestors who not only believed in it, but with their very lives made a real world we have yet not seen. And it is important not to remember the past, but to rededicate ourselves to building a beloved community that is equal and just for all people. So today we celebrate Juneteenth, and we must be reminded, without the struggle, there cannot be freedom. Without the struggle, there cannot be peace. Without the struggle, there cannot be hope. So my friends, it was 157 years ago that my enslaved ancestors were told that they were free, and the struggle continued then, and it continues today. But there is still hope, and I'm hopeful. The struggle continues. May this be so. Amen.
We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across the earth.
Before I give the benediction, I want to first thank the participant of worship today, Jamie, for your wonderful music. Barre and Jim in the sound booth. Thank you, Isaac. And for my friend and brother, Grant Honeycutt, who actually gave up his Father's Day to join me today. Okay, please rise for the benediction. Now go forth into a world in peace. Be of good courage. Prove all things. Hold fast to what is good. Honor all people, knowing that we need each other to survive. Go forth knowing that you are blessed and that you are to be blessing to each and every one that you meet in your journey. May it be so. Namaste, Ashe, Amen. And now for our closing hymn.